So just to give context for the audience and the people that are watching here. So I'm chilling with three incredible entrepreneurs, guys who are up and coming in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And these guys happen to be my friends. Like, I got friends in high places the whole time, right? So, we're going to talk about their podcast. It's called Unicorn. But before we get into the podcast, this is what I want you guys to tell me this a little bit, right? By the way, I've got Thulani Masebenza, I've got Bubu Buna, and I've got Kopano. My bad for not introing you properly, ne? Aware.
That's cool.
So, you guys really, really, really were on the path that makes parents proud. You really were, right? You guys did well in high school. You feel me? You went to these elite universities, studying these dope degrees, and then you got a corporate job. A corporate top-tier job where you wear a suit, tie, and fawn chinos, bro. That was your life. Earning a stable salary, medical aid, the whole thing. And you guys just decided to quit the life that makes your parents proud. What's up with that? Yo, let's start with Kopano. What's up with that? What inspired you, right, to get off the road that's most commonly traveled to jump onto this entrepreneurial journey from work? Let's start there, Kopano, and then yeah.
Okay, and I'll explain it from the perspective of taking the road least traveled, because it wasn't just about leaving corporate.
Yeah,
it was about me following a journey that I believe was destined for me. So I like entrepreneurship because it allows me to express myself. It allows me to uniquely identify problems and work towards finding solutions to those problems. And where I was at that point in time in corporate, I didn't feel liberated enough to exercise that. And so, I had been thinking about it for a while. I had already been doing something outside of work over the weekends. And when the opportunity came eventually to kind of go on my own journey outside of a predetermined, path, I figured maybe this is what I've been led to. Yeah. So I don't like bashing on the job market or corporate or anything like that.
Shout out to the job market, always.
Yeah, I just think I just have to take a journey that's least traveled because that's what I've been called to. Yeah. And it's hard, I'll tell you that much, it's hard. Yeah, and that reasoning is the only thing that makes me sane, to be honest, because if I had left just for the sake of owning my own thing or not being anyone's, employee or something like that, I think I would have quit a long time ago, but it was more about I can't run away from my own calling. So I may as well embrace it at this point.
Like, it's really the pursuit of freedom. It's the pursuit of freedom. And like, if you can really, embrace an environment where your value is absolutely taken care of, that's the only way to do it, entrepreneurship. And I say entrepreneurs, artists are in a unique position because these are the only vocations where your value is literally tied to your output completely, and whatever you get is commensurate to what you produce. And that's just it, the pursuit of freedom. Thulani, what did it mean for you to leave corporate? You made your mama proud. Now what you doing to your mama now?
No, it was definitely a big jump. I guess similar to Kopano, it was more of a journey within.
Yeah.
Because I actually didn't not enjoy corporate. I think a lot of people that become entrepreneurs like vilify the whole job market thing and you've got a boss. I actually, to a certain extent, I did enjoy my job, but from the perspective of self-fulfillment, I felt like I could have been doing more. I mean, we see the African context and the problems that people are facing. I felt like maybe I could solve those problems, and maybe I was naive in thinking that, I went to business school, had that opportunity to learn this exciting information. Why don't I put it to use to help other people? So it was a scary time jumping from corporate, and it's a funny story because Kopano and I made the jump at the same time.
Yeah. You guys were
So
at a
I think that
conference boardroom and you were like, yo, we're going to leave. Is that what happened?
yeah, one day it actually needs to be written in a book. But I think that also definitely helped as well. Like obviously jumping along with someone that's your close friend, because it is scary. It's very,
Yeah.
very scary. 'Cause
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying. You determine your own income. Output is all based on you. If you fail, like there's obviously a lot of outside factors, but it's all directly linked to you. So that was very, very frightening.
And it's just one of those things where like your state of health, like from a mental point of view, my bad, like your state of health from a mental point of view literally reflects on your business. That's just the craziest thing in the world. Like it's also the greatest risk ever as an entrepreneur that we always take all the time. And I appreciate that. Bubu, Wagwan, why did you leave corporate?
And I've been in love with entrepreneurship and startups for pretty much like the latter half of my varsity career. I kind of stumbled upon this amazing thing. And what drew me towards this was, oh, you get to solve problems and you get to help people on a large, grand scale. And I was like, awesome, this is me. And actually, I studied law, and I remember all my friends were starting to apply, you know, for like internships and places to do articles.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, that's not what I want to be. That's not where I want to go, you know? And just from that moment, I never really wanted to go into corporate. And to be honest, if I had the choice, I wouldn't have gone, but it was like, there's no real opportunity for me to do anything else but to go into corporate. It's it's the wisest thing to do. And it's the option that makes the most sense right now. Yeah. And so I found myself in corporate, and, you know, everything that I thought that I wouldn't enjoy about corporate came to fruition. And it's just, it was a great learning experience being in corporate. Like it taught me a lot about like myself, and also it allowed me to be more human. Like it allowed me to engage with a lot more people than I had during my varsity career. But I still felt that this isn't the end for me. This is not where I want to go. Now, I'm not glorifying entrepreneurship. Yeah. And I honestly wouldn't tell anyone to become an entrepreneur, as all of us on this call know how difficult this journey is.
Do not glorify it, bro. Yeah.
Don't do it. Yeah.
It's not romantic.
It really isn't. Yeah. Like 80% of the time, it's just like pure stress, pure struggle. But it's what I enjoy. I enjoy the problem-solving aspect of it. And so I just didn't get the same kind of rush and thrill of creating something new with reckless abandon. Like, okay, cool. Guys, today we think that this is the strategy we're going to go. Tomorrow we're literally executing. And there's no need to go through all of these bureaucratic processes. And eventually maybe the companies that we're building will eventually get to a size where that happens. But right now, the freedom and flexibility and being able to impact humans' lives is just absolutely amazing. So that's why, for me, making the jump was difficult. Like it was obviously a tough conversation with the parents to be like, yeah, I'm going to leave this comfy job with a medical aid and all these things to go and jump head deep into this. But, you know, my parents were really amazing, and they were really supportive through this journey. So, you know, like it's amazing to be able to take the jump and know that the people believe in you. So you're not like trying to fight this thing alone. You've got a great network. So yeah, man, it was, for me, it was a no-brainer when it came through.
That's fundamentally important. I think I really want to pick up two things from what you and Thulani were saying right now. I think like one, the most important thing for me in entrepreneurship is the fact that you can optimize the amount of value you can create for the world. You can literally optimize that, right? So for example, Thulani, you were just speaking about how you look at the African continent as a whole, and you look at everything that you've learned, like throughout your degrees, things that you've studied, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're like, I am least likely to impact this continent the way that I want to in this environment. So I would rather start something that would really impact the continent that I truly care about. So that's the one thing that I found that is really, really important. And it seems to be a golden thread that runs throughout the entrepreneurship community especially among young entrepreneurs. But two, just like the importance of having a support structure and just a network of people, you know, that become a nest for you in this environment. And like I said, me having entrepreneur friends like you guys is the greatest thing ever. Because when I'm going through business failure, I know I just pick up the phone and I know, yo, Bubu got my back just from hearing me out. You know, just hear me out. This is what happened and this is how we can iterate going forward, etc. So that's really inspirational, gents. And like, you know, I think we can proper dive into the actual details of the podcast itself. So Unicorn, right, is the podcast. And like before we really get into the nitty-gritties, I just want you, for the benefit of the viewers, to define what a unicorn is. What's that thing, bruh? Because like I have a kid and, you know, I'm watching Disney Channel the whole day. So I have a specific interpretation of what a unicorn is, you know?
Yeah.
So help us here. Why is a business podcast? What's going on?
Let me take a shot at that.
Oh, wait.
So a unicorn is an animal that looks like a horse, kind of, and has like a horn, you know, on its forehead.
Okay.
So that's the Cartoon Network version, you know, or the Disney version, you know. But the whole concept of a unicorn is that in real life it doesn't exist. All right.
Yeah.
I can't even say. I want to say 1 in a million. Yeah, but it's an interesting concept. It doesn't exist. It's from something that you can relate to. So you can relate to a horse or a zebra or whatnot, but you haven't really seen a unicorn.
Yeah.
And so that concept coming into companies, it's kind of the same understanding of, it's based on something you can relate to, which is a normal concept of business.
Yeah.
However, there is a kind of extraordinary take to a unicorn company. So I believe Bubu knows where it originates from, but I'll just say that it's a very rare thing that you see in business as far as unicorn companies go, and it relates to something that we know in business. However, it's a very odd concept, and it's a sight to marvel at.
Yeah. What is a unicorn company, Bubu?
So technically speaking, a unicorn is a startup. Startups and businesses, pretty much the same thing, but startups are like a little bit different. But it's a startup that is valued at over $1 billion US.
Let's go.
That's the technical term.
All right.
Now it's a billy, and
it's a billy, bruh.
Yeah, it's a whole entire billy, and now how the valuation comes about. You know, like, how do you define, okay, cool, it's worth $1 billion. So you may ask yourself the question, oh, so that means that their profit is 1 billion. More often than not, no. Then their revenue is 1 billion. No. And we covered this in the first episode. It's pretty much like, what are people valuing it in the community to say, okay, this startup is valued at over 1 billion. They've got a bunch of different things. I think, look at revenue multiples. They can look at the potential of the market and what you can do with all the user base that they have, and what the company could potentially be in the next 10 years, and do all a bunch of these different things. And then investors will come along and say, okay, cool, the valuation of the startup is $1 billion. And that's when they hit unicorn status. Sure. So it's not even that they've raised $1 billion. Yeah. It's just that they valued at $1 billion.
So let me track back a little bit, right? So it's the metaphor, right? So a unicorn in mythology is this perfect, majestic horse, this creature. It's prized above any stallion in the world, right? And it's as if people are in pursuit of finding this mythical, magical creature, right? And no one actually finds it because it's not really there. So people can obsess about the concept of a unicorn, but it isn't actually there. The value isn't there. You can't climb on a unicorn and ride to the end of a rainbow and find a pot of gold. That's not going to happen. And so what you've done is that you've brought it into the business perspective and said, okay, there are a set of very majestic companies, like really, really big startups that founders have founded a couple of years ago that have reached this unicorn status. But what makes it unicorn is the fact that they're valued at, at a point where that isn't quite tangible. Is that what you're saying? That's the unicorn and mythology part of it. Is that what you're saying?
It's incredible. Like, unicorns don't exist and they are imaginative. And now we are coming in and valuing these real entities at over $1 billion, even though they're not valued. They're not like worth really $1 billion.
The accounting.
Like when you really sit down.
I guess, just to jump in, worth is worth is in the eyes of the beholder, if I put it in that way, right? Yeah. So to your point, there are different concepts that we use and we've collectively agreed on them that are measuring sticks of how valuable something is. And I think, that's kind of the same concept, even with a unicorn. We give it the worth that it is. We've pretty much created a unicorn. It doesn't exist, but we've created it. And I think even in the concept of companies that get valued at so much, we've collectively created that valuation based on principles and concepts that we've come together and agreed on. But I think what's important to recognize as well is that there are certain implications with that come along with being a unicorn. For you to be able to be valued at so much, you obviously have to prove your current worth. So evaluation is pretty much projecting current performance, right? Saying we're growing at this rate, or we're doing so much, we're adding so much value. In the next 5 to 10 years, this is how much we're projecting to be doing in the world. Yeah. And so that looks at your vision as a company, that looks at, your value chain and so on. So I think there are things just over and above the valuation, although that valuation is important. And yes, it dictates you being a unicorn, but there are other softer things that come along with being a unicorn company.
Yeah. So Thulani, what seems to be happening here in this podcast, in what you guys are trying to achieve, is that there's a balance between a moral question, right? What does it take morally, to measure companies to an extent where they can become $1 billion companies, and whether or not we agree with the method of valuating this company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But also, on the flip side, there is what I think we may call the benefit of having a number of companies that are valued this high, that are valued this much in an economy that could benefit from having these kinds of companies. What's the balance from a moral and from a business point of view? Should we even aspire towards running companies, that are performing at this level from a valuation point of view?
So yeah, those are like fantastic insights, because I guess some of the core themes of the podcast is, I guess, the central theme of unicorn safari. Like, does a unicorn belong in a safari? And obviously a safari is an environment within Africa where, I guess, African animals thrive. So if you use that analogy, we're trying to tie together the concept of, does this mythical creature which exists in other domains like Silicon Valley, and now they're popping up in Asia. Just last year, there was a unicorn in Latin America. So does this rare animal belong in Africa? And based on, I guess, your question or your insight with regards to morally, is it right to have companies that grow from 0 to $1 billion in 4 years in the African context, like South Africa, where job or unemployment is so high, where there's so many underperforming economies across the continent? Is it ethical to have these companies that, I guess, disrupt industries and, I guess, eat away at competition. So a central thing to the podcast is exploring those moral questions. And I guess maybe the audiences will see that we vary in opinion. Sometimes one person can be the devil's advocate.
Yeah.
The next time someone can agree that no, these things actually do have a positive impact on society. So my view is I'm 50-50. I do believe there is obviously an economical benefit. They mainly do benefit venture capitalists.
Yeah.
And the argument is, yes, they do like benefit users, but I think what we're seeing in America is almost this type of surveillance capitalism where now these unicorns are like encroaching on people's rights, and obviously they're using data to do things like determine elections. So those are a lot of concepts which we will be exploring, but I think if you just look at it from the business angle, I do think there is a benefit to having unicorns. But we'll definitely have a lot of debating there.
Yeah, I can't wait really, because like it's such an interesting take, because usually you know, people that would be covering these kind of topics wouldn't themselves be entrepreneurs, right? There's usually like a dichotomy between an entrepreneur, which would be quote unquote kind of boxed in as a capitalist, and general society. So a journalist, a hardcore investigative journalist, would take on this topic and would be critiquing the three of you, you know, as tech entrepreneurs. But it's so interesting to see entrepreneurs themselves grappling with the moral question as their businesses are unraveling, all right? And so what I want to ask, Bubu, what does a typical episode look like then, right? Because I have a perspective that, look, we are tackling a moral question and we're simultaneously tackling a business question. We're in pursuit and we are in critique. So it's a wonderful, wonderful blend, right? But like, what does a typical episode look like? And what do I expect as an audience member?
So a typical episode is pretty much you as an audience member joining in on one of conversations we typically have as young tech entrepreneurs. And it's like three friends who are getting around a table and having discussions about this conundrum that we find ourselves in. Like, we're tech entrepreneurs, and at the end of the day, we all have for-profit companies, and we want to really push towards getting our companies to be valued as highly as possible. But at the same time, all of us are social tech entrepreneurs. You know, we're trying to figure out, how do we help people, whether it's what Thulani is doing, how do we help small businesses, whether it's Kopano, how do we improve the healthcare system within South Africa and globally is what the aim is going to be. And then myself, like, how do I find a way to like play a role in reducing graduate unemployment? So we have a roundtable discussion grappling with, how do we work between these two? Like, are we suffering from cognitive dissonance, you know, doing this thing? Like, is it even our place to say, okay, cool, no, tech entrepreneurs should be doing this, and we should leave the other stuff for people in the political realm? So it's just generally conversation between guys, and each episode is going to be covering like different topics. And within the series, we're trying to answer questions like, you know, are unicorns harmful or helpful to the world? Like, why are we so obsessed with unicorns? As Thulani was alluding to, like, can they even exist in Africa, or should they exist? You know, we explore different concepts that have come about as a result of people saying like unicorns are bad. Things like zebras, things like camels, all these little nuances. And throughout the series, we're going to be getting not just our voices and our opinions. We're going to be chatting with guys within the South African ecosystem, from investors to other entrepreneurs, getting their insights in, seeing what they say about it, and then just us finding a way to grapple with this whole thing. And hopefully at the end of this whole series, like, not only will the audience know more, but we'll also be able to know more a bit about ourselves, what companies are we trying to build, and what the future of Africa looks like for startups.
Sure. And I think, you know, and I say this like all the time, like, I think if you're an entrepreneur in Africa, you are an entrepreneur in the real world. You know, we cannot like just because we have such easy access to information in Silicon Valley doesn't mean that we have to behave like them. Doesn't mean we have to behave like we exist in a bubble. We're actually in the real world. We have a very high youth unemployment rate. We have endemic poverty throughout the continent, and our businesses necessarily have to make the continent better. So this is why it's important for a podcast like this to exist, because this is it can only exist in Africa, in my opinion. It can only exist in Africa where a tech entrepreneur, right, with so much access to information, who's highly educated and who's constantly tethered to the Western world, to ask themselves really, really deep moral questions as to what they want their own businesses to look like on the continent. And I think that's really powerful, gents, what you're doing here. And I can't wait for it. Two questions, right? And I'll ask Kopano this one. How are you going to, what I'm really interested in is hearing how you're going to weave your own stories as entrepreneurs into this podcast. So how are you going to achieve that? Because I think, in the entrepreneurship landscape, we are missing role models, and it's very important to hear what it's like to be an entrepreneur in this era. Are you going to do that? Are you going to weave your own stories in, and how?
Yeah, so definitely we do want to give a deeper insight into the lives that we live. And as hard as that is for us as entrepreneurs, you're not always comfortable sharing your L's or your struggle moments. It's easier to share the highlights in your life, but
in an era
when
of
I think back,
Instagram. Yeah,
exactly.
Nobody sharing L's on LinkedIn. Imagine sharing an L on LinkedIn. I just failed. I fired everyone.
You know what I mean?
On LinkedIn, yeah.
But I think it's so important to be real and to be human.
No cap, yeah.
And I think that contrast between a unicorn, something that doesn't exist, versus being human, something that is very real.
Yeah.
That's the range I hope to explore in this podcast, to say that, look, I am chasing, a dream that I have, a vision that I want to see through, but at the same time, I'm human, and I make mistakes, I fail, but it doesn't take away from the journey that we're on. So how we'll do it, a very interactive manner, very anecdotal manner. We want the podcast to be fun, as much as there'll probably be aspects or episodes where it's quite heavy. Our intention is for the listener to walk this journey with us, to learn with us as we go along on this journey. The question we're asking ourselves constantly is, who are we becoming in the process? As we're building these businesses, as we're building ourselves, who are we becoming in the process? And what are we building in the process as well? We want as many people along on the journey with us, because this conversation does not belong only with entrepreneurs. To your point of who should have this conversation, we want as many voices as possible, because what we do, as much as sometimes we see it only affecting us, it's just us, the entrepreneur in the business, and your customers, but there are other stakeholders that you may not even know directly that are impacted by what you do. So we want voices, from political background and legal background, public background, private background, just to see, the entire society, to see how it works. I'll give one small story, about my realization behind this. So in the beginning of the year,
I'm running out of time. Make it quick.
Great. So I was in San Francisco, and I've always wanted to go there because that's where companies and unicorns are, and all of this great hype around startups.
Yeah.
And I was walking on the street, and I'm noticing how many people are homeless, right? So I begin to ask, what's going on? Why are there so many homeless people? Someone said to me, well, San Francisco, Silicon Valley as it's known, is becoming a tech hub, right?
Yeah.
And because all of these big companies want to have the best talent, a big incentive for them to do so is to pay them as much as possible. And so you have all these people working at these big tech companies earning so much, and they want to live within close distance to where they work. And so the property market shoots up, you know what I mean? So you have people who, if you're not in tech, you can't afford to live in the area. And there was one particular person who we were at a social, and they asked me, they said, your accent sounds very different. Where are you from? And I said, I'm from South Africa. And they said, okay, cool, interesting. Why are you here? And I said, well, and I was excited to share this, right? Because I'm in Silicon Valley. I'm like, no, I'm here because I want to build my tech company. And they're like, oh my gosh, not another tech. Not another tech idea. And it's because of the burden it has on that society. Yeah. And so these are the things that we need to explore. Yeah. As much as we're building these great companies, what are we building indirectly as well? And who are we becoming in the process?
Yeah, sure. Guys, look, wow, that's incredible. Like if the hypothesis and the aims and objectives of this podcast lies deep within those kind of stories, this is going to be incredible. This is going to be unbelievable, and it's going to be supremely important. And what I wish for you guys is an audience that literally grows with you as you grow as companies and as you grow in your thinking about this topic area. And there are people more and more. As you acquire customers, you're acquiring audiences as well, who are not only buying your products, but are also grappling with these supremely important questions. Gents, we're out of time, but geez, thank you so much. We can't wait. Look, this podcast is going to be available on Spotify, on Stitcher, and on Apple Podcasts. It's called Unicorn. Gents, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, bro.
No, thanks.
Looking forward to it. Yeah.
Away.